I'm curious as you are finding your seat, how many of you like to be surprised at Christmas time? Can you just show a hand, show me? It's a good amount of us, more than the earlier service. How many of you don't like being surprised ever in your life? Can you just show me your hand? Yeah, some of you were slow to raise your hand just so you didn't surprise yourself with that. I like to surprise people. I don't necessarily like surprises. Marissa says this because I like control. I do though. I love to surprise people, but when it comes to me, I don't want to be surprised, not ever. I suppose it depends on whether you're an optimistic person or a pessimistic person, whether or not you think it's going to be a good surprise or a bad surprise. I think when it comes to surprises, if you like surprises, you just haven't lived enough life yet. Because my kids think every surprise is amazing. But I do. I like surprising people. It's hard, though, with the advent of online Christmas shopping. I find it really hard to surprise anybody in my family anymore. Can anybody relate to this? Maybe you can give me a few pointers. Honestly, I'd appreciate it. Because like in our marriage, Marissa and I, we share everything. We have a shared bank account. We have a shared Amazon account. We have shared payment sources on our phones, so anytime we purchase something, we both get the notification that it was purchased and from what store. It is great for unity in your marriage. It is horrible for secrecy. And so now romance in our marriage, all the mystery is gone. It's just come down to logistics at this point. And it's not just with Marissa. I struggle to surprise my kids because I refuse to go to a physical store and survive the crowds during Christmas time. I mean, I love my kids, but I don't love them that much. Even my love has limits. And so what that means is I'll get them gifts, I'll order them things, but I'll order online. And our household assistant, Alexa, does her best to notify them whenever those things are coming. To the point of like, hey, your Switch video game is coming on Thursday between 1:42 and 1:47 p.m. Like she doesn't just tell you that it's coming, like she is telling you how confident that she is. It's 5 stops away. How do you know this, Alexa? Are you watching? If by some miracle, the grace of God, I'm able to navigate all those variables though, I still have one dilemma that I have to deal with. And that is the fact that whenever a package shows up at my door and I'm not there to nab it quickly, I have to deal with the return address. Because even if you don't know what something is, the return address lets you know where it's from. Has this ever happened to you? It's like, it happens, the doorbell rings, one of my boys goes out to grab it. Hey, Dad, it's a Nike box. I wonder what in the world this could be that was definitely on my Christmas list. Or, Pippa grabs something and she's like, hey, Mom, there's a package from your favorite skincare company. I can't surprise them. And I bring that up just to say, you can tell a lot about something just by the return address. That's why this prophecy we read in Micah, it's so significant. Now, I want to give a little background on this book because Micah is perhaps a book that you've skimmed over, and if you're not that familiar with the Bible, you might not even know it's in there. It's one of what's considered minor prophets, not minor because of importance, just minor in size. Micah would have ministered around the same time as Isaiah. Isaiah is a prophet a lot of us are more familiar with because he's a major prophet. His book is 66 chapters. It's in the middle of your Bible. A lot of people are familiar with Isaiah. Micah, though he ministered the same time as Isaiah, where he differs is he's not from Jerusalem like Isaiah was. Micah was from a small border town on the edge of Judah. That's the southern kingdom of Israel. It was in 2 kingdoms at this point. He's from a small border town called Moresheth. Can you say Moresheth? I just want to make sure you're with me. Kind of sounds like you might be asking for more of something. But Micah, he grew up living on the edge. And living on the edge is maybe a good way to describe his perspective because He carries a different view than most of the prophets we read about in Scripture, where a lot of prophets spoke to the palace. Micah would speak to the people. His prophecies carry a global weight, and we can even see that in this passage that we read, because when he talks about the Messiah, he says this of him, that his greatness will reach to the ends of the earth. That's not a figure of speech for him. He's looking past just the national interest going on to see the impact that the future Messiah, Jesus, would make in the world. And it's relevant because the context in which Micah is living, there's a lot going on right now just in his nation. I told you that the kingdom is divided in two. Not only that, Jerusalem, the capital city, is failing. Its government is failing. Its leaders are failing. There's corruption, and you see this through Micah's book. Micah understands how a national failure affects the real lives of people. That's what makes it so interesting when we get to chapter 5, where he's given this messianic prophecy, because he doesn't respond with the national solution. Instead, he responds by pointing to a single address: Bethlehem. Bethlehem. Now, this would have shocked his hearers, because everybody alive at the time, though Bethlehem was a real place, they wouldn't have thought much about Bethlehem. It wasn't just small, it was politically insignificant. It was historical, but not influential. Historical because it was the place that David, Israel's greatest king, came from, but it was not a place of political power. It was not a place of prominence or influence. It was a small shepherd village 6 miles south of the capital city, if you could even call it a village. So when Micah mentions it, it was puzzling. It forces his hearers and it forces us to ask the question, why? Why draw attention to a place that centuries later Joseph would return to with his betrothed Mary? And it's a question that I want to take time to answer today, because the answer begins with the first truth I want to tell you. That the return address tells us something really important. The return address tells us that God is knowable. That God is knowable. Just for example, we all know there's a different feeling when you rifle through the mail and you see all the different things with your name on it, and you look at the return address. There's a different feeling with a letter that has your friend's name on it and a letter that has your insurance company's name on it. Don't get me wrong. I'm thankful for my insurance company, my bank, and my mortgage provider all remembering me at Christmas time. There's nothing that says glad tidings like the festive annual reminder that your rates are going up. But the truth is, when you go through the mail, the ones you open, the ones you look for, have a return address with a personal name, not a corporation, not a company. That's exactly what God is doing here in this prophecy. This is God identifying his own involvement in the plan of redemption and in the purpose of your life. I want you to watch how personal the language is in verse 2. It lets us know that God wants to be known. He wants to be known by you. He clearly identifies himself. He says, "But you, Bethlehem, though you are small among the clans of Judah, out of you will come for me one who will be ruler over Israel, whose origins are from of old, from ancient times." It's that phrase, "for me," that I want to point out to you. Because Micah, he's given us much more than just a location. He's telling us about the one who stands behind it. This is God claiming ownership of what he is sending into the world. And he's identifying himself in the process. It tells us that salvation and redemption came out of God's initiative. Like, we can have this mindset sometimes that God responded to our need, and so that salvation is a result of our need instead of beginning with an act of divine will. I want you to get the difference, because if you have that mindset, you are going to go through life with this idea that God is distant, that he is far off, that he cannot be known, that he is staying hidden, that he is hard to figure out. And that is not the truth. What we see through Micah's prophecy is that God has always desired to reveal himself to humanity. And he's done it through his son, Jesus. I don't know if you noticed this, but it said his origins are from of old, from ancient times. That tells us that it didn't start in Bethlehem. No, it was just the entry point, but it was not the beginning. Throughout history, God has always been about making himself known. And Luke tells us about this detail, that it's not just something he did in principle, it's something he did practically. You notice how in Luke's gospel, he makes a point to tell us that when Joseph and Mary returned to Bethlehem, the reason that they had to return to Bethlehem wasn't just to fulfill a prophecy. It was because there was a census in the land. Think about what a census is. Most of us would just skim over that detail and not give it any second thought. But a census exists for one reason, so that people can be named, can be identified, can be traced, can be counted. Understand, Rome was in authority at this point. Rome didn't govern through rumor. Rome ruled with records. They had names, addresses, family ties. They wanted to know what was going on. And so when Luke tells us how Joseph traveled to Bethlehem for a census, he's telling us something important. Jesus was there so that he could be counted, so that he could be named, so that he could be known. This is a moment in history that you could audit. Here's the point. You don't have to spend your life trying to decode God. You don't have to spend your life trying to wonder what is the intent of his will. You don't have to guess at his plans. You don't have to hope that you've interpreted him correctly. God desires to make himself known to you. That's what this prophecy tells us. He's not a far off God. He's a personal God. He has been communicating throughout history. You can know me. You can have a personal relationship with me. He cares about the desires of your heart. He cares about the things weighing on your mind. He cares about your children. He cares about your financial situation. Sometimes we have this idea, with everything going on in the world, does God really even care about me? My problems aren't that big. They're so small in the scope of global issues. But Micah, who had a global perspective, he's reminding us that God cares about you personally. He wants to make himself known to you. So not only does the return address remind us that God is knowable, it also tells us that God is accessible. God is accessible. You know, there's a reason that letters include a return address. It's not just for the benefit of the post office. The return address lets you know that you can respond. You think about this practically. Without a way to respond, you receive a letter, a message, a package, anything. You don't have a phone number, you don't have an email, you don't have a physical address. The message might be meaningful, but that's where the relationship ends. After the reading's done, there's nothing beyond it. But Bethlehem, it functions like an address label on the gift of God to us. It might not be impressive, but it lets us know it's accessible. It's an actual location with a spiritual application. The point is, Bethlehem is not symbolic. When Micah tells us a savior, a ruler will come out of Bethlehem, he's being specific. He could have said, there's going to be a Messiah that'll come from an obscure place, a small town, a place that's overlooked, a place that you wouldn't consider. But he names a specific place to let us know that this is a real place, a real moment in history, connected to real people, real geography. Any of the hearers could have checked it out. They could have walked there. It was only 6 miles from the capital. That's why Bethlehem matters. It lets us know that God is leaving a point of contact. We've all had this experience before, I'm sure. You order something online. It could be digital, virtual, it could be physical. You order something online, and when you get the product, whatever it is that you requested, the service, something's not right. It doesn't function the way it's supposed to. It didn't show up in your inbox. The download didn't work. The package is broken. So what do? You do what every sensible, responsible person does. You go back to the company that you ordered from to try and solve it. The only problem is when you go there, there is no customer service number to call. There is no email address to write. Maybe you get some AI chatbot, but typically what you get is a page with a list of FAQs and endless links that keep you in a cycle of customer service hell, of just trying to solve the problem, but there's nobody that you can talk to. Bethlehem is the antithesis of that. Bethlehem is God saying, you can reach me. You're not stuck. You can get to me. Luke reinforces this point. Understand, Joseph doesn't travel to Bethlehem because he understands prophecy. Joseph isn't going to Bethlehem because he's spiritually perceptive or he understands how this is going to play out all with God's plan. If you read in the context of the Gospels, Matthew tells us that when he first finds out that Mary's pregnant, he wants to quietly divorce her. He's not caught up in the fact that he's going to fulfill God's divine plan to be part of raising the Messiah. That is not on his mind. Joseph is not presented to us as this paragon of spiritual maturity. No, the only reason he goes to Bethlehem is because he was required to. Now, this is good news for you and for me. And there's a principle here that I want to help you with. The principle is that God is accessible, but you have to move to meet him. Let me help you with this. See, many times we think the way we access God is through our behavior. If I can just do enough, if I can live right, if I read my Bible, if I got my prayer life like it's supposed to be, if I'm avoiding sin, if I'm doing all the right things, then God's presence is going to be in my life. And those are good things. I encourage all of those things. But I want to help you with this. Bethlehem was not a spiritual test. It was a physical place. And all a person had to do was get to the physical place. This is what I love about church. Because a lot of us, we relate to God through our performance, thinking that, you know what, if I have a good week, God loves me. If I have a good week, God is present in my life. And all the time, the thing that keeps us away from God is we know all the places where we fall short. You know, I didn't live up to my own standards. I fell into temptation this week. I got caught up doing stuff that did not honor God. I didn't touch my Bible this week. I barely thought to pray. I was rude to my wife. I yelled at my kids. I snapped at my staff. I didn't follow through on my work commitments. Why would God love me? Why would God care about me? But can I tell you, if you can just get to this place, God's Spirit will meet you here and he will speak to you and he will encourage you and he will strengthen you and he will help you and he will uphold you and he will establish you. You just have to get to the place. God is accessible. It's not based off your performance. It's not based off how good you are, but you do have to move to meet him. It's good news for you and for me. You don't have access to God because of your effort. Closeness with God doesn't come through your performance. It's not some spiritual measure of achievement. Christmas reminds us that God has already placed himself within your reach. You just got to move to meet him. It's the return address. God is knowable. God is accessible. But I want to give you this last one. It also tells us that God is responsible. God is responsible. There's a reason that the return address exists, and it's not for decoration. It's not out of tradition. I don't know about you. I remember in grade school, this used to be something they would teach us, like how to write a letter and the right way to do it. And you put the sending address here, but you got to put the return address in this corner. They would grade you on the right lines and punctuation and all of that. Why was that so important? Because the return address, it exists to tell us who's responsible. Nobody sends something valuable and just hopes that it arrives. I don't know about you, anytime I'm sending something and it's really important that it gets there, I go to the post office and they ask me this question: would you like to put insurance on this? And then I have to give them my contact info. Why do I do that? Because it's important to me that what I'm sending gets delivered. Now, if I'm doing that with something as simple as a document or something as temporary as a material item, how much more does God care about the gifts and plans and purposes and grace that he sends into your life? The return address of Bethlehem, it reminds us that God is responsible. And Micah makes this exact point in his prophecy. He just does it with theological language. I want to read it to you. It's in verse 4. It says, he will stand and shepherd his flock in the strength of the Lord, in the majesty of the name of the Lord his God, and they will live securely, for then his greatness will reach to the ends of the earth. I like this phrase, they will live securely. I bet if we just took a minute and we did pass the mic, we're not going to, but if we did pass the mic and we just said, hey, how many of you struggle with insecurity? There's not a person in this room that couldn't identify at least one place in their life where they are insecure. And we have this idea that security comes from our ability. All I need is a little more willpower. All I need is a little more strength. All I need is a little more self-confidence, and then I will be secure. But notice, Micah doesn't say that they're going to live securely because of their effort. Not because they finally got their act together, not because they finally got organized, not because they finally learned everything that they needed to. No, the reason they live secure is because of the shepherd's presence. See, you don't need more confidence, you need more God-fidence. You need more God confidence. You need God's presence in your life, recognizing that he is the one that makes you strong. You can stand because of him. Understand, the shepherds had to stay involved. This was one of the reasons that during the time when Jesus was born, that shepherds were looked down upon. They were viewed as low class. Because in Jewish culture, a very important part of honoring God and pleasing God was in keeping the Sabbath ceremonial laws. Keeping the rabbinical statutes and ceremonies around not working on the Sabbath and being clean. Shepherds, they couldn't do that practically. Watching the sheep was 24/7. They didn't just say, hey, the sheep look good now, you're moving the right direction, I'm kind of going to let you be on your own. No, they lived among them. They had to stay with them. They didn't just check on them occasionally. They didn't lead them from a distance. They didn't abandon the flock whenever they needed to get something else done. And here's what that means for you and for me. That security, it's not a result or a reward for your good behavior. It's a result of God's presence in your life. See, many times we carry our faith like it's fragile, like we've got to hold things together just right. We've got to make sure we're keeping our checklist of spiritual requirements. And when we do all those things, then we have God's presence in our life. Then God is close. Then we're secure. Then we have God's goodness. But this is why Micah's message is such good news to us. It offers us a different picture, that what God sends, he will sustain. It's a little bit like when you order something off Amazon. You might not know this, but people don't order off Amazon just because it's fast or convenient, sometimes affordable. People order off Amazon because it also comes with something called the A to Z guarantee. You maybe didn't know this. Let me tell you what it is. The A to Z guarantee is that they promise that when it leaves their warehouse, even if it comes through a third party, because it's their name on the box, that they're going to make sure that it's delivered. So if it gets damaged, if it gets lost, if it gets stolen by a porch pirate off of your doorstep, the A to Z guarantee is that Amazon stands behind what it sends. Now, if Amazon will do that, how much more God, when he sends his grace into your life, is going to make sure that it will not get lost, that it will not get damaged. It says he sends his word and it will not return void. It means that what he sends, he delivers. Can I tell you, I don't have an A to Z guarantee, but I do have an Alpha and Omega promise in your life. That what God sends, he will sustain. That when he brings a gift, when he sends his grace, that you don't sustain it by your efforts. That's why his grace is unmerited. You didn't earn it. You can't sustain it on your own. You can't perform your way into it. No. There's only one thing you can do when God sends his gift, his grace, his plan. You've got a choice. You can receive it or you can reject it. It's interesting to me that sometimes people would reject what somebody sends. It happens though. You know, occasionally we'll send out a mailer, a postcard, inviting people to church. It blows my mind. People are so uptight about a postcard that they will pay the postage to send it back. They will tape it to the door. I don't want this in my life. I shouldn't be surprised though, because people did the same thing with Jesus. John tells us this very thing in his gospel. John chapter 1, verse 11 says that Jesus, he came to his own people and even they rejected him. But verse 12 says, but to all who received him, he gave the right to become children of God. All they needed to do was to trust him to save them. I like this because it tells you exactly how to receive. You might be here thinking, how do I receive the gift that God sends? How do I receive his grace in my life? You know, Pastor Justin, what you're talking about sounds really good to me because honestly, like I am stressed trying to live just right. I feel like I'm constantly disappointing God. I feel like I'm constantly falling short of my own standards. I feel like, you know, I'm not a good enough husband. I'm not a good enough wife. I don't live up to my parents' expectations. I clearly don't even live up to God's for me. I do my best to follow him and I fall short. I fall into sin. I lose my temper sometimes. You're telling me I don't have to earn this? I just have to receive it? How do I do that? John tells us, trust in him to save you. You just got to trust the sender.